Hey traders, it's John Fortune here of this week's weekly Forex Forecast. I hope you're having a great weekend. Let's kick off with the DXY and then we're going to run through 20 markets in this morning's video. The DXY is currently in a process of reversing, but it has not yet reversed. So it leaves us in a kind of a neutral stance in the DXY as it currently stands. We're sitting at a previous key area of support where we could see the market bounce here. However, my anticipation going into next week is that we break this low in the DXY. And this will confirm a double top reversal in this market, and it will set up further declines to the downside, down towards the next key area supports the downside and the target set at the 90.62. So what I would like to see going into next week in the DXY is a break of this low to confirm this double top reversal in the DXY, and that will give me a bearish bias down to the next key area support to the downside, the 90.620, and it's going to mean that once we break this low over here, I favor dollar weak positions in the markets primarily next week. Next is euro dollar. Now we were looking for short positions in euro dollar and we came down and took out the target set at the 1.17950, almost to the point before starting to reverse in euro dollar. Going into next week, you can see being the inverse of what we looked at in the DXY, we're still structured to the downside, just as the DXY is still structured to the upside. But we're starting to break above the key area of resistance, and it looks like we may also get somewhat of a double bottom reversal in this case, as opposed to a double top reversal in the DXY. Both are likely to happen at the same time. If we come up and break this level in the euro, the bias in euro dollar will switch from bearish to bullish, and this is what I actually anticipate happening. And once we break the high over in this area, I will be looking for further advances and bullish setups into the 1.20910. So again, very similar to what we looked at in the DXY, the market has not yet reversed, which is why we're showing this both ways. But I anticipate a reversal heading into next week in euro dollar, and this will confirm a bullish bias in euro dollar next week. Next is pound dollar. Now pound dollar has already reversed to the upside, so especially if we can get that double top reversal in the DXY next week, this is going to support pound dollar for further advances to the upside. Any pullback in this market is going to be viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals into the next key area resistance to the upside, and this is the bottom of this consolidation over here at the 1.4072. Now the green level here, for anybody who isn't sure, and also you will see red levels in some of the other charts, this is essentially the line in the sand. If we're looking for bullish setups and bullish reversals, it has to be above the 1.37930. If we come down into this area and we start to break higher, I'm not going to take these setups. The setups in this case have to be above the 1.37930, and any break below this level is actually an indication we may be failing and starting to reverse lower. And again, exactly the same applies when you see the red levels to the upside on these charts as well. Next is US dollar Swiss franc. US dollar Swiss franc sold off quite hard last week, and this confirmed somewhat of a head and shoulders pattern. So I go into next week with a bearish bias on this market, and again, especially if we can get that double top reversal in the DXY, that would be great. Any pullback in this market, and you can see the line in the sand here is the 0.92510. Any pullback towards this area will be viewed simply as an opportunity to look for bearish reversals into the next key area of support to the downside and the target set at the 0.9081. So you can see I've really simplified these charts for you coming back this week. All of the markets are between a key area of resistance and a key area of support, and one of those levels will be the reversal point in the market where the bias changes, and the other will be the target for the coming week. US dollar yen. Last week I had a really nice sell-off to the downside with momentum, so this is really pointing to further declines in this market. We started to pull back, which is great because we came very close to the target, so any deeper correction is going to give us better and better risk-reward setups in this market, and any deeper correction is simply viewed next week as an opportunity to look for bearish reversals down to the next key area of support to the downside and the target set at the 109.51. Next is Aussie dollar. Now the next two markets, Aussie dollar and New Zealand dollar, are essentially like a plan B going into next week, because we've looked at dollar week setups that I'm going to be looking at building into my trading plan for next week. However, this is on the assumption that we break down and get that double top confirmation in the DXY. What happens if we do not break down? What happens if we start to bounce and instead of making a new low, we start to rally higher in the DXY? Well, this is where Aussie dollar and New Zealand dollar come in as kind of plan Bs. If we do not get that breakdown in the DXY, I will be looking for that dollar strength in Aussie dollar to the downside, New Zealand dollar to the downside. Those will be my two markets. So very simply put, if we fail to break lower in the DXY, what I will be looking for in Aussie dollar is any deeper correction will be viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish reversals. And I'm going to be looking down towards the next XauUsd support to the downside, the target set at the 0.7401. Now, if we do start to break lower in the DXY, what you're likely to see here is Aussie dollar will just continue to trade to the upside like this and reverse. However, if the DXY, which is doing this currently, fails to break the low and rallies higher, you will, or you should start to see bearish reversals in this market, perhaps a head and shoulders, and that would be the opportunity to start to look for shorts in this market, trading that failure to confirm the double top and new highs in the DXY. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. It gives us the ability to trade this both ways next week. So the second chart I'm looking at here is New Zealand dollar as a backup plan to that failure to confirm the double top in the DXY next week. If we do get that strength in the DXY, I will be looking for bearish reversals in this market off the back of that. I'm going to be looking down towards the next XauUsd support to the downside the target set at the 0.6842. So just bear in mind, if we confirm that double top in the DXY, what we looked at the beginning of the video, then Aussie dollar weakness or Aussie dollar short positions and New Zealand dollar short positions come off the table. I will only be focused on the dollar weak positions we looked at. So these are just backup currencies if we fail to get that double top reversal in the DXY next week. Next is crude oil. Now crude oil traded into the 76.77, which was the target set previously for you guys in crude oil. We traded right into this and almost reversed to the point to the downside. We had a really big sell-off in crude oil from that target. Going into this week, I favor shorts in this market. The line in the sand is the 76.42, so any bearish reversals will have to be below the 76.42. Any continued pullback in crude oil, as I said, will be viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish setups down to the next XauUsd support to the downside and the target set at the 69.75. This sell-off in crude oil as well and any further declines in crude oil should weigh in on the Canadian dollar. So Canadian dollar weakness is also something I'll be keeping an eye on for next week. So the first Canadian dollar pair I like is CAD franc. We had a really nice sell-off to the downside, great momentum, and this is setting up as a bear flag. So any continued correction in this market, and I do like this market going into next week, is simply viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish reversals down to the next XauUsd support to the downside and the target set at 0.7254. The next CAD pair I like is CAD yen. CAD yen also has really nice momentum to the downside and is setting up a bear flag. So this pullback is simply viewed as an opportunity to short this market at a better price. Any continued pullback, again, as long as we do not start to trade above the line in the sand at the 89.69, is simply viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish reversals down to the next XauUsd support to the downside and the target set at the 86.99. Aussie franc is also a very nice looking market going into next week. We crashed through both targets set in this market from previous videos. Going into next week, this is definitely a market I'm going to be looking out for bearish setups and further declines. Any continued pullback, and as always, the deeper the better, will be viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish reversals down to the next XauUsd support to the downside and the target set at 0.6756. Next is Aussie yen. Now Aussie yen was a market highlighted previously and we came down, took out both targets, finishing right at the second target in this market. Going into this week, I do like this market for further declines. We're setting up a nice bear flag and any continued pullback in this market, and the line in the sand is the 83.75, so we have lots of room to work with here for bearish setups. Any deeper correction is simply viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish reversals down to the next XauUsd support to the downside and the target set at the 80.92. New Zealand franc, we traded into a previous target at 0.65410 and we had a big sell-off in this market from that level. This is another good market going into next week with this momentum to the downside. This is indicative of lower lows to come, further declines, and we're setting up this bear flag. So any deeper pullback is simply viewed as it stands as a gift really for further lows in this market. Any continued pullback will be viewed as an opportunity next week to look for bearish reversals down to the next XauUsd support to the downside and the target set at the 0.6306. New Zealand yen has been a really nice market recently. I highlighted this for declines to the downside and we took out the target almost to the point at the 76.24. I still like this market going into next week for further declines. Looks like we have 1, 2, 3, and we're going to get a fourth, which we're currently in, and then a fifth wave down. So any correction in this market is simply viewed as a classic bear flag setup, and any bearish reversals will be viewed as an opportunity to look for short positions down to the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 75.63. SPX. Now in previous videos I highlighted the fact we broke out of a consolidation here, and I was looking for a pullback and a retest. We actually tested it twice, and I was looking for a move into the 4361.92, which we did finally complete last week. So a really nice move in the SPX. Going into this week, I am still bullish on stocks. I see a lot of people talking about maybe deflation or starting to see stocks coming down. I do not see it. This is not what my data tells me. I think we're good at least until September in terms of the stock market. So going into this week, very simply put, any pullback in this market is going to be viewed once again as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals into the next key of resistance, the upside, the target set at 4430.58. Next is the Nasdaq. Now the Nasdaq previously took out the target I set for you at the 1499.06, and this thing is still trending to the upside. So going into this week, there's no reason, in my opinion, not to look for further advances. Any pullback in this market is simply viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals into the next key of resistance, the upside, the target set at the 15236.09. Next is the Nifty. Now the Nifty is still bullish overall. However, we have been correcting. It's been a very good market. We've been taking out multiple targets to the upside, and now it's going through a period of consolidation. So very simply put, I wouldn't necessarily short the Nifty. However, I don't see any really good bullish setups. I would like to see it breaking out of this consolidation phase. We're forming somewhat of an ascending triangle pattern as it currently stands. So what I'd really like to see is a breakout of the top of this pattern before I turned really bullish on the Nifty again. And as it currently stands, I go into next week with a neutral bias on the Nifty, and I don't really have any interest in trading the Nifty next week. Don't forget, knowing when not to trade is also as important as knowing when to trade. And I think this market requires a little bit of patience. Next is gold. Now we have a double bottom reversal in this market confirmed above this high. And this sits nicely with that idea that we're going to get a double top reversal, which is in process but hasn't yet happened in the DXY. Therefore, any reversal in the DXY will be supportive of gold to the upside. So any pullback in this market to next week is simply viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals up to the next key of resistance, the upside, and the target set at the 1850.94. Next is silver. Now we also have a double bottom reversal in silver, very similar to what we looked at in gold, confirmed above this level. And this is pointing to further advances to the upside. We've pulled back to the line in the sand at 25.8040. So we're still in bullish territory here. So very simply put, this is now a great place going into next week to start to look for bullish reversals in this market. And especially if we get that double top reversal confirmed in the DXY, it's going to green light all of the dollar week setups we've looked at today's video. Any bullish reversal is simply going to be viewed as an opportunity to look for long positions into the next key of resistance, the upside, and the target set at the 27.46. And last but not least, we have Bitcoin. Now I have been bearish on Bitcoin recently into the 30,000 level, which was the previous target, which we took out over here. And I did note, for those of you who follow me on Twitter, that we could see Bitcoin bottoming around the 30,000 or the 28,000 levels. Now, looking at Bitcoin, it is still bearish, so I would technically only be looking for short positions in this market. However, if we start to get that DXY double top next week and we confirm that and we start to break lower, this is going to be supportive of Bitcoin. So if we start to get a double top reversal in the DXY, do I really want to be shorting Bitcoin at this level, especially as we're failing, really struggling to break previous lows down here with any real conviction? The answer is no. So if we break low in the DXY, I will just filter this market out. And instead, if we start to get dollar weakness, what I would like to see is if Bitcoin starts to trade above the line in the sand here at the 35,188, this would actually be the sign to start to look for further advances to the upside in Bitcoin. And I will be looking to the next target at the 39,326.17. So just to clarify, Bitcoin is structured to the downside, but the risk of a reversal next week, especially if we get a reversal in the DXY to the downside, a risk of a Bitcoin reversal to the upside is great enough that I would just not be wanting to short this market next week. So that is it for me for this week, guys. Remember, I'm not looking to trade every market. Those are the markets I'll be keeping my eye on, looking for setups as they appear in those markets in the directions highlighted next week. I want to say a big thank you to everybody who likes, shares and comments on these videos on a regular basis. And I want to say a big thank you to everybody who sent me nice messages last week. I always try to reply to as many as I can, but I do also read all the comments as well. So thank you for that, guys. Aside from that, I want to wish you all a fantastic weekend and I want to wish you all the best in your trading next week. The only thing left to say is take care and don't forget to trade safely.